It's often debated whether or not Flying Scotsman was truly the first steam locomotive to break the 100-mile-an-hour speed record, with many contending that Great Western Engine's City of Truro was the one to do it first. Whether or not an outside-framed 440 could achieve such a feat is mostly down to personal opinion. But there was another Great Western engine that supposedly might have not only broken the speed record before Scotsman, but utterly smashed it. By 1906, George Jackson Churchward was in the midst of designing and refining his new Saint class of locomotives for the Great Western Railway. By this point, he'd experimented with several different designs using different boiler types, cylinders and wheel arrangements, but was leaning towards a 460 layout with 2 cylinders and tapered boilers. 19 engines had been built by this point and were known as the Scott class, 13 of these being initially built as 442s. The second batch of Saints was built in May 1906, these being designed with 6-foot 8.5-inch driving wheels and a pair of 18 1/8 by 30-inch cylinders. 3 were fitted with shorter boilers, while the first one was fitted with a different set of cylinders and a superheater. At the time, it was common practice for Swindon works to fire up new or freshly overhauled locomotives and take them for a run to ensure all parts were working correctly and to see if anything needed adjusting before being put into service. A line commonly used for this was the route from Swindon to Stoke Gifford, as it was low traffic and long enough to allow express engines to get up to top speed with plenty of distance to stop. Typically, engines would run there at a moderate speed to check bearings weren't running hot and the controls were satisfactory, and run back at high speed to make sure the engine was capable of delivering its expected performance. Great Western Express engines never typically ran faster than 90 miles an hour as they had no need to, and as such drivers never really exceeded this limit during testing. It seems, however, that City of Truro's supposed record of 102 miles an hour inspired some members of staff to have a shot at it themselves. The story goes that during the same May the Saints were built, while Churchward was away on business, assistant manager of Swindon Works Charles Collett requested to supervise the trial run of newly built engine 2903. He was curious to see if a freshly built express locomotive could reach 100 miles an hour, and with the impressive performance of the Saints so far, he felt now was his chance while Churchward's proverbial back was turned. Joining him on the footplate was locomotive inspector G.H. Llewellyn, foreman of the erecting shop Mr. Evans, and a driver by the name of H.J. Robinson. They drove 2903 light engine to Bristol Parkway and turned it around for the return trip. On the way back to Swindon, they stopped at Chipping Sodbury and waited for the line to be clear up to Wootton Bassett, giving them over 20 miles to get the engine up to speed, with part of the line having a 9-mile downward grade of 1 in 300 to help them get up to speed, and a 6-mile climb of 1 in 300 towards the end to help them slow down. With the signals clear and a full head of steam, they set off. During the run, timings on the footplate suggest the engine managed to hit the 100-mile-an-hour target, but more impressively, it was clocked at taking 2 minutes to travel the 4.5 miles between the signal boxes of Little Summerford and Hull Avington, which would mean that 2903 managed to reach a speed of roughly 120 miles an hour. What exactly happened after Collett's little outing isn't known, as there's no official reports of this event, but one can imagine everyone on the footplate would have been a little shaken up from the ordeal. 2903, along with the rest of its batch, were put into service and given the names of ladies from various myths and poems in 1907, with 2903 being given the name Lady of Lyons. Like City of Truro's supposed speed record, Lady of Lyons' run was kept quiet until years later when Robinson finally told the story not long before his retirement. As thrilling as this tale is, it's not one without its fair share of skepticism. Like with City of Truro, measurements of speed taken from the footplate were done with no proper measuring instruments, only stopwatches and mileposts. As such, there comes the question of how accurate these measurements were, whether times were rounded up or down to the nearest second, and how much human error came into play. The signal box timings too aren't the most reliable record to go off of either, as timings were usually rounded to the nearest 30 seconds, so that 2-minute time between Little Summerford and Hallavington could have been rounded down, meaning up to 30 seconds or more may have been shaved off the time, drastically exaggerating its recorded speed. On top of that, many question whether or not Lady of Lyons could have even handled such speeds, as, to be blunt, it was a fairly simple machine compared to something like Flying Scotsman, which itself took a lot of balancing and preparation to do the 100-mile-an-hour run. All of this to say there's no real way of knowing whether or not the engine even made it to 100 miles an hour, never mind 120. But it's safe to say it must have been thrilling to have been standing on that footplate when they gave it a go. 2 more iterations of the Saint design followed after the ladies, and the class proved to be decent express performers. So much so that they served as the basis for Collett's later Hall-class locomotives, and by extension the rest of the Great Western's 2-cylinder 460s that helped define the railway. All of the Saints were tragically scrapped by the end of 1953, with none surviving. However, one was rebuilt in 2019 out of Maindy Hall to keep the legacy running, aptly named Lady of Legend. Whether or not you believe Lady of Lyons could have actually gone over 100 miles an hour nearly 30 years before Flying Scotsman is up to your own conjecture. It's not entirely out of the realm of possibility for an express locomotive running light engine at full speed downhill to reach ludicrous speeds, but the lack of any official evidence and the often exaggerated nature of the event leaves enough doubt to keep people guessing. I suppose this'll just be another one of those stories that people will keep debating, but isn't that mystery what makes railway history so interesting? That is until Lady of Legend takes a shot at it, assuming someone brave enough steps forward to give it a go. Subscribe for more.